Welcome to the Autonomic Healing Podcast. I'm Tom Pells.
And I'm Ruth Lawrenson. We'll be unpacking what it looks like to activate your brain to holistically manage stress and trauma that bring healing to the mind, body, and spirit.
Being free to live authentically as humans.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started. So, Tom, we've reached the final stage of rational intimacy. Can you believe that?
Yes.
And it's been a real pleasure actually to go into it in a lot more detail. You know, we've in season 1 of this podcast we talked about rational intimacy, but we wanted to give this like deep dive into all the stages. But here we are, we're in stage 8 of rational intimacy, and you know, there's a circular nature to this, which we'll talk about. But so it's not like ending. It's It's the whole point is that continues that motion, continues the flow of those stages. But we're in stage 8, which is all about motivation. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about motivation today. And do you want to kick us off?
Well, if we just talk about motivation and what motivation is the reason or the reasons for why we act and behave in certain particular ways. Mm-hmm. And it's also the general desire or willingness of someone to do something.
Yeah.
So why am I doing what I'm doing? And why am I willing to or not willing to? And if you think about motivation then, and you think about stress and need, they're dynamically connected. Mm-hmm. It's out of a sense of stress and need that our motivations arise. But that can either be beneficial or detrimental. Go ahead, you're going to say something.
No, I'm just like thinking as you're speaking, and I wasn't thinking about this before this episode, but I was just thinking about my kids and just kind of how, you know, how they so lack motivation sometimes. Like, for example, if I'm asking them to tidy their room, and I can either, and as you were saying, stress and trauma, like hopefully they're not traumatized, but if I put too much pressure on them, it doesn't do anything for the motivation. In fact, it makes everything worse.
Right.
So if I keep checking on them and or keep asking them, it like their motivation level plummets. Or at least with one of them. And
their willingness to do.
And so I'm just kind of thinking of that little example.
Because their motivation shifts to something else.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And the motivation isn't toward tidying their room. Their motivation is toward not tidying the room.
Or procrastinating or whatever else it is.
Exactly.
But I was just thinking about how the pressure you can't force motivation. And that's my lesson as a mother, I think. You can't force motivation in your children to do these things. Yes. But I wonder whether, you know, a simple example like that is actually if you trail that all the way through, you know, adult examples, there's some similar strains there, you know, with like it has to be real. Number one, it has to be a real motivation. It can't be I think we do have different pressures of society, parental pressures, so to speak, that actually they try and motivate us, but they don't work. So what we're talking about here is what really works, what is really healthy.
Yes. And we also want to distinguish between 2 different types of motivation. There is intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation.
Okay, explain a bit more.
So extrinsic motivation is mom is saying, I have to clean my room. That's extrinsic. It's external to me.
Yes.
That may be entirely in conflict with an intrinsic motivation, which is I want to play a video game, or I want to go play with my friends, or I want to do anything other than clean my room. So there can be conflict motivations between extrinsic and intrinsic.
Yeah. This is so helpful. I feel like I'm getting a parenting lesson right now. Okay, carry on.
So the intrinsic motivation may be and is probably going to be more dominant than the extrinsic at times. And sometimes the extrinsic is much more dominant than the intrinsic. So they're not in balance and they're not in harmony.
So this comes back down to, does it come back down to like this kind of, I guess if you have a higher how do you say that again?
Extrinsic?
Extrinsic. Is that, could you be more people pleasing?
Yeah, absolutely. Or performance.
Yeah, or more, yeah, all of those types of things. And then the other one, if you kind of ignore that, the extrinsic, and a very
intrinsic,
it can be healthy, but actually there is a level that you need to be aware of those outside demands and expectations, I guess.
And Abraham Maslow in 1943 wrote, in many ways, what's considered sort of the definitive, one of the defining theories of human motivation. And it's literally titled A Theory of Human Motivation. And it was Abraham Maslow in 1943. Bear in mind that Dr. Walter Cannon, only about 10 years prior to that or so, coined the term homeostasis. Yeah. And so that homeostasis was so fundamentally impactful to the scientific community. And what is it to be human? What is it to be an organism? And all the rest of that. And so in his 1943 paper, he outlined 5 different needs. And it's a hierarchy of needs. It builds like a pyramid, and that's often how it's represented, as there's a foundational one, and then it builds up from there. And in his paper, he talked about the most basic need, which is physiological. Yeah. We have to physiologically survive.
Yeah, so if you're hungry,
if you don't have food, you don't have water, you're not going to survive.
And you're not thinking about anything else other than that very present need.
Yep. And as to quote from his paper, the needs that are usually taken as the starting point for motivational theory are the so-called physiological drives. 2 recent lines of research make it necessary to revise our customary notion. So this was a shift about motivation from previous. 2 recent lines of research make it necessary to revise our customary notions about these needs. First, the development of the concept of homeostasis. And second, the finding that appetites, preferential choices among foods, are a fairly efficient indication of actual needs or lacks in the body. Homeostasis refers to the body's automatic efforts to maintain a constant, normal, optimal state of the body. And when it comes to the bloodstream, what Maslow pointed out was that Cannon has described this process as the water content of the blood, salt content, sugar content, protein content, fat content, calcium content, oxygen content, constant hydrogen ion level, acid-base balance, and constant temperature of the blood. And if you think about what people have cravings for, it's often because of a lack of that in their body.
Yeah.
If the water content of the blood, I'm really thirsty. Or I just want some salt or sugar.
Those salty chips.
Sweet and salty. And protein and fat. And when these things are not in balance in the body, we naturally crave them. But that can get into a motivation related to, this is really gratifying. So I'm going to overindulge in fat or sugar or whatever. I remember when I was a child, because of the trauma that I had, I would crave fats and sugars. Mm. I would literally, and I cringe when I think about it now, but I was trying to compensate for the impact of trauma on my physiology. Wow. Because trauma physiologically harms the homeostasis. It disrupts that. And so I would crave sugars. I would crave stimulants and that sort of thing. And I would literally take a spoon and I would spoon some butter, and then I would dip that, roll it in sugar, and eat that.
Wow.
And later, as I gained my more culinary expertise, I would make pans of fudge.
Oh,
why?
Wow.
Because I was trying to compensate and manage the energy levels. That's why, for instance, with ADHD, stimulants are given. Mm. I was my own pharmacist. I was craving these things because...
to calm your system down.
Exactly. And so we have these physiological needs, and homeostasis, which is why AHA is so significant, is because I'm either trying to externally manage those and have inherent motivations to do that, or I can let my brain be the therapist, and my brain is managing all those kind of things. Mm. And so physiological needs.
And can I just say that,
yes.
I know we're talking about motivation, but I just find it fascinating. I think from, and we did a lot of this in season 1 while we talked about some of the clients that have come through and what they've experienced. But I know that a lot of clients have seen physiological changes after AHA because homeostasis has been achieved. And so I just wanted to bring that up because I think that's why it actually can affect our physical, the balances physically. And so a lot of the trauma upsets those balances. And so I think that's fascinating that's part of this, you know?
Yes. And so there's homeostasis. And then second, the finding that appetites are a fairly efficient indication of actual needs or lacks in the body. And I would extend that to saying it's actual needs or lacks for the organism, for the person. And it's not just my body that lacks it, but it's I as an organism have a need for things. And you combine the homeostasis with the compensating for needs, and you've got motivations that can be for foods, for work, for all sorts of things. So physiological needs is the foundational one. And we are motivated, and we have these intrinsic, or they may match or conflict with the extrinsic motivations for physiological needs.
Yeah.
I'm going to survive, and I'm going to do what I need to do so that I do survive. Second one Maslow identified was safety. And you see how, if you think about it, stress and need, are they related to safety?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And safety. And that isn't just physiological safety. That can be emotional safety. That can be relational safety. And if we don't feel safe, and we have these needs and stresses that are triggering, it may well be that that's disrupting the physiological unhealthy diet, things like that, but also compromising a sense of safety. Yeah. And I may even perceive myself as unsafe, even though in reality I am safe.
Yeah.
And that can be physiologically, it can be relationally, it can be emotionally, it can be spiritually. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think safety is so important, that sense of feeling safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, Tom, that so many, I think when we think of it, we can apply it to, well, you're just you're living in a safe country, or we can often apply safety to a physical thing, but actually there's so much psychological and emotional and spiritual that's at play. And I remember when I was kind of a young adult, and I was going through a really stressful time, and I remember verbalizing, and I didn't really understand what it was, but I remember saying to someone, I just don't feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't make sense, because I was in a perfectly, I wasn't in a bad neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
No one was actually threatening any physical harm to me, but I just felt like there was a lack of safety emotionally at that time, so, and I remember thinking how destructive it can be when it's not there, but also how important it is for a whole thriving adult life, to feel that sense of safety.
Mm-hmm. So then, building on the physiological, and if that's met, and the needs for safety are met, then what Maslow talked about was the third one is love, and the love need. So if both the physiological and safety needs are pretty well managed and satisfied, that opens the realm for love, which is interesting because, and love as that relational connection. And from the perspective of the tsunami of stress, there can be love, but air quotes, because it isn't actually loving, because it's all about the tsunami of stress. It's about need and stress and distress and discontent and avoidance and evasion. And if you're thinking the word love connected to all of these, there can be expressions of it, but it's not loving. And then the resistance, the defiance, the anger, and the not being assertive. And then I just want to feel good. Love?
Well, you can imagine all of the disasters taking place.
That can be, I just want to feel good. Yeah. So I just had this weird thought. There was this popular song, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me. What? Wait a minute. What is love? Don't hurt me?
Don't hurt me, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that could be all sorts of things. That could be a substance. That could be a situation in life. It could be a relationship. It could be a position. It could be all sorts of things that communicates a sense of I matter, I have worth, I have significance, but not for a healthy reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the shame and the guilt and the fear and the self-condemnation, and then I don't want to think about me. Love. But it's not love, because it's not loving. It's just connection or attraction or relationship, and it can be very intimate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And so we have a need that, I think what you're saying is that Maslow, his description is absolutely accurate. There is a need of love, but some of the types of love that are pursued in the tsunami of stress aren't real love. They're not loving. And so they're not going to fill that need. So you can kind of you can be in a relationship, you can be in all sorts of places and community settings, but actually still feel that need that Maslow's describing, because it hasn't been met, because it's not real love.
Yeah. So Maslow, if both the physiological and the safety needs are fairly well gratified, then there will emerge the love and affection and belongingness needs, and the whole cycle already described will repeat itself with this new center. Now the person will feel keenly as never before the absence of friends, or a sweetheart, or a wife, or children, will hunger for affectionate relationships with people in general, namely, for a place in this group. He will strive with great intensity to achieve this. He will want to attain such a place more than anything else in the world, and may even forget that once, when he was hungry, he sneered at love.
Yeah.
And interestingly, he goes on, and this is 1943, but it sounds so relevant now. In our society, the thwarting of these needs is the most commonly found core in cases of maladjustment and more severe psychopathology. Love and affection, as well as their possible expression in sexuality, are generally looked upon with ambivalence and are customarily hedged about with many restrictions and inhibitions. So his point is that love is that third. So physiological needs are met. I'm safe. I can risk love. And I want love. And I want that connection and belongingness. And then his next one is esteem needs. All people in our society, with a few pathological exceptions, have a need or desire for a stable, firmly based, usually high evaluation of themselves, for self-respect or self-esteem, and for the esteem of others. And that can be very motivating.
Yeah.
Think well of me. That can be status, it can be position, it can be self-confidence, it can be strength, capability, adequacy, all sorts of things. But it's about self-esteem. And then the final one is self-actualization. Even if all these needs are satisfied, we may still often, if not always, Maslow says, expect that a new discontent or restlessness will soon develop, unless the individual is doing what he is fitted for. A musician must make music. An artist must paint. A poet must write, if he is to be ultimately happy. What a person can be, they must be. This need we may call self-actualization. This term, first coined by Kurt Goldstein, is being used in this paper in a much more specific and limited fashion. It refers to the desire for self-fulfillment, namely, to the tendency for the person to become actualized in what is potential, fulfilling our potential. And fulfilling our potential when you're starving to death is probably not going to be high on your list.
No.
Or if you feel like I don't have safety, or loved and loving.
And also the
I don't
flip side
think
of
well
that.
of myself. What am I going to create?
And
Go
I'm
ahead.
just saying the flip side of that is not only will you not think of self-actualization when you're in those stages, but you can't actually get self-actualization without love, without safety. You know, there's some level of those having to be met that enables the self-actualization as well. It's not that you just can't even comprehend it. It's just that they need to exist. It's like stepping stones towards something that we're meant to be doing.
Yes. And so, how does all that relate to rational intimacy? Those 5, if you think about it, rational intimacy, the first stage, is contentment. That isn't conditional on whether there is or isn't stress, whether there is or isn't need. It's the sense of contentment because I feel secure and capable to deal with the stress and need. As opposed to in the tsunami of stress, I feel insecure and incapable, and then the stress or need dominate the motivations. But with I feel secure and capable because of homeostasis, now I can deal with the stress and need.
And because we always say that, you know, within rational intimacy, the stress and need doesn't go away.
No, always is.
That's not what we're talking about.
Right.
It's that's why that first stage is so important. It's like, okay, it's happening. Things might not be perfect, but I'm content. I feel secure and capable to be able to deal with the present situation that I'm in.
And so if you think about secure and capable in terms of these 5 motivations, there is physiological. Do I have everything? Do I have to have everything for my physiology? Can I deal with hunger? Can I deal with exertion? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel secure and capable of dealing with that. And then am I safe? Yeah, I'm safe. Does that mean there are no threats? No. I remember rock climbing with my son, and he was on belay. And was I safe? Yes. Did I necessarily feel safe backing off the top of a cliff? No. Wasn't the point. I was safe. And I stepped back and sat back into the harness because my son was on belay. I was safe. Did I feel safe? 40 feet up off the ground and I'm hanging by a rope? No. But I was. So my point is that physiological safety may or may not be necessarily all in place. And then that third one, love, to what degree? Complete? No, but it's there. And it's about being loving to self and others. That's why I remember we've talked about that.
Yeah.
And so and then as far as esteem needs, I'm esteeming myself. I'm valuing me. That's why I feel secure and capable. I matter. My well-being matters. I'm seeing to that. So that's why all 5 of these are inherent in each one of the stages of rational intimacy, all at the same time, to one degree or another, and more in focus than necessarily another one.
Yeah.
But they're all there at every single stage.
Wow.
So with the first stage of I feel secure and capable, and yes, there's stress, yes, there's need, but my motivation isn't about that. It isn't driven by those basic needs. It's informed by them.
Yeah.
We can be driven. Motivation can be something that drives us, or it can be something that informs our choices and decisions. Do you hear the difference?
Really hear the difference, yeah. And that's so important because I think in so many people would see motivation as a driver. And that's where I guess it would fall into some of those unhealthy
absolutely
habits. But when you see it as something that informs you, there's just a very different relationship. Like something that drives you has, in some ways, more control. That's what it sounds like.
Than you do.
Yeah, well, something that informs you, you still have the control. You still have the choice. You can choose what you want to do with that or not. Whereas something that drives you is it sounds like it's like a self-driving car. You know, it sounds like oh, this thing's going whether I like it or not, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a healthy appetites that can come along with that, I think.
And it's because in the tsunami of stress, it's about feeling insecure and incapable, but in rational intimacy, you feel secure and capable. And the brain is the therapist. The brain can get us there.
Mm-hmm.
And then these motivations, these needs, inform our choices and decisions, don't drive them. And then in the rational intimacy paradigm, the first stage gives way to the second stage, which is grace,
Mm-hmm.
composure, and gifting, and the expression of gifting. And I bring that to the relationship with myself, others, and my environment and situation. And now I am empowered. Where I felt secure and capable, now I'm empowered. And with the third stage, engagement, I'm connecting with people and situations. And you hear Maslow's hierarchy of needs with love and safety and all those kind of things. And then I am influential. And it's not a control. It's not a lack of control. It's I'm influential in beneficial ways with myself and others. That naturally then manifests in devotion, a deepening commitment and love and loyalty and fidelity to a person or a cause. And that may be me, it may be, and here you're hearing again Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And then devotion and visions. What are the possibilities?
Yeah.
What could be? Where could this go? And rather than the fantasizing of what will gratify me and what will make me feel good, I'm influential and I have a healthy self-image and a sober self-esteem, and I'm motivated and I'm envisioning possibilities. So now that secure and capable is elevated. And I feel even more secure, more capable, because I'm envisioning the future. I'm seeing what could be the possibilities. Where can this go? And then I want to live that out in rational intimacy with myself and others, my environment, the situation. And then I am even more empowered. As I'm living that out, I'm feeling even more empowered. And then commendation. Well done. And I'm all the more influential positively in my own life. And that makes me all the more influential in other people's lives. When we have a sense of, man, you're a contributor. Look what you're doing and how you're helping and all the rest of this stuff.
And you believe it.
And you believe it. You're all the more influential in your own life and other people's lives.
Yeah. And that...
motivation. That's very motivating. I want to do more of this. I want to live this out. I'm motivated. So it's not that motivation is when we connect with those 5 motivations. It's kind of an ultimate fulfillment of them.
Yeah.
They're there. Do they have to all be there entirely? No. The world doesn't work that way. There's always stress. There's always need. Can we deal with that? And that is an enhancement of our self-image and self-esteem. That motivation seeps into and informs the image we have of ourselves and the esteem that we have for ourselves.
Yeah.
And then if that resonates with others and they resonate with that image of us and that self-esteem and that esteem that we have in their eyes, we can internalize that. Agree.
Yeah.
And then if it's not, that's okay. because I know me and I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Which ultimately the expression of the motivation is for you to want to do that whole rational intimacy again.
So it's
and
very
it
circular.
builds
Yeah, and building. Mm-hmm.
momentum.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's amazing.
And then we feel even more secure and capable. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's so. In a nutshell, what we're talking about here is just a really healthy motivation, and the real reason why we need motivation. What motivates us, which are those 5 Maslow hierarchy of needs within the rational intimacy paradigm. And so what would you say is, I guess, would you say within rational intimacy, we've talked about it being circular and it's not, you've reached it. In some ways, this is very different from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because he has the triangle and then you're at the top and then where do you go, But this is a circle. This is actually you get motivation and then it propels. So it's almost like fuel. Do you see it like fuel? Like it's the fuel of rational intimacy?
I see it like a Mobius.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's like our logo, right?
It is. And that's why we chose that. And the AHA, it's a Mobius. And it isn't a cycle. It's a never-ending loop.
Yeah.
And you can be on one side of it or the other side of it. And the picture of the ants that was part of that original expression of a Mobius, top or bottom, there isn't one. There's just that eternal loop movement that just keeps building. That's rational intimacy.
And so what is motivation within it? It's the
motivation is the expression of it. Because if you think about it, Maslow titled his paper about basic needs as a theory of human motivation. Motivation and needs are inherently connected. It's like 2 sides of the same coin of the being of the organism.
Yeah.
The existence of it. Need drives motivation. Motivation satisfies needs, or it simply attempts to gratify and feel good. That's the difference between satisfaction and gratification, which is a fundamental in the first stage of both the tsunami of stress and rational intimacy. There is stress and need. Do I have a sense of contentment? Then I can go into rational intimacy. If I don't perceive that sense of being able to deal with and address the stress and need in a healthy, beneficial way, then it's off into the tsunami of stress in that cycle.
Yeah.
Yep.
That makes sense. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I think it's so important. Rational intimacy without motivation, you can't have it. It's not that is part of that whole making sure that the Mobius, the flow, the eternal flow of this paradigm continues. So that's super helpful, Tom. Thanks for sharing that. And just the whole of rational intimacy, it's a really different paradigm to live in. You're not in it all the time. Sometimes you're oh my gosh, I'm in the tsunami.
Find yourself in the tsunami, and then you realize, I'm not going to try and breathe underwater. I'm just going to exit that and get into rational intimacy. That's why AHA is so significant in body, mind, and spirit, because it facilitates homeostasis, and the brain is the therapist.
That's right. The brain is the therapist. Guys, listeners, you can make that a hashtag if you want. The brain is the therapist. Thanks, Tom. See you in the next episode.
You've been listening to the Autonomic Healing Podcast.
Join us next time as we continue in our conversations with Tom. If you're interested in pursuing your own autonomic healing journey and want to find a practitioner, visit our website, innerworkings.org. See you at the next episode.